mystery theory. Another Monday and another mystery. And I've been reading a lot of unsolved mysteries that are just bizarre, crazy, and unexplainable. And there are a lot of theories about what happened to these people, but really there is no definitive answer. Like last Friday, I shared the case of the probably gonna butcher it again, Angie village in Canada, that they all vanished in the middle of winter, along with all their dead people that were dug up when the ground was still frozen. So, if you missed that one, please check it out. It's my last upload to here on YouTube. There's also a new video on Patreon that was released Saturday. I'm gonna leave a link to Patreon down below. I know most of you receive notifications, so when I post, I can see it in the views, but just in case, I'd like to remind everyone it's already there. Thank you once again for helping me spread the word with my channel and my videos by leaving a comment, an emoji, or something to let me know you're there. I appreciate if you take the time, just a few seconds, and it really helps me a lot. So thank you. Now let's talk about, and I'm gonna talk briefly about this case because it is an unsolved mystery. Could I do an in-depth of this case? Yes. But I think I'm gonna get myself into a lot of trouble because of some of the theories. So I'm gonna scratch the surface in this video. But if you really want an in-depth case or video on this particular case, please leave it in the comment and or like a comment that asks for this, and I will certainly share an entire video on this, even though I get in a lot of trouble every time I do something as controversial as this thing. This is the most mysterious disappearance in recent history, and it's gonna take us all the way back to 2014, March 8th, when it was a routine red-eye flight for the crew and passengers of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. It was carrying 227 passengers that went through security at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. It was a typical routine flight. They waited in the departure lounge, and even one of the passengers that was there called his sister to tell her that he would see her in Beijing, where the flight was heading. Most of the passengers were Chinese who were heading home from Malaysia, but sadly, none of them would ever see their friends and family again. Now, once the aircraft arrived to the airport where the passengers were waiting, is they inexplicably disappear from the air traffic controller's radar. Military radar, however, continued tracking the plane for the next hour or so, during which time it was heading west over the Malay Peninsula and on to the Andaman Sea. Probably butchering all that. It's funny because my brain goes to the Spanish name of the sea, and so when I see the letters together, my brain wants to say the Spanish word for it, but let's keep going. Beijing, of course, was to the north of this, so something must already have gone wrong at this point. They continued to fly for about 200 miles in the wrong direction before vanishing from military radar near northwest Malaysia. Now you have to understand, and I don't claim that I fully understand how the air works, but you have a route, and unless there is something wrong and you need to move to another route, you kind of have to tell your tower what you're doing, and you're kind of reporting what you're doing, and they give you a go, go ahead and do that. But flying wherever the heck you want, it's not a possibility, especially for commercial airlines. It is a dangerous thing to do. The air is being monitored by radar by different military in different countries, and as you know, not everyone is very nice, and they won't hesitate to make a point that nobody should be there. So, knowing that they continue to drive for 200 miles with no contact into the opposite direction, just consider fuel. You're adding 200 miles to an already planned trip, and that it's a dangerous decision to make. By the way, I was gonna mention it at the end, but I kind of started going through this case after watching the show on Netflix, Manifest. I loved it. I can't wait for the next season. There's 2 seasons already, and the whole idea was that they were in Jamaica, and this tourist from New York, and they got split into 2 planes, and the second plane that brings some of the family members vanishes, and then all of a sudden comes back 5 years later. But for the people in the plane, no time had passed, and for the people at home, 5 years, they are 5 years older, and that's kind of the story behind Manifest. And I have to admit that kind of triggered my curiosity as far as this case, because it's one of those things that 370. Although, what I don't understand is that you know how you're waiting for somebody at the airport, and there is this screens where you can check the time that they're going to arrive. I wonder what they did over there, because if people were still waiting there, maybe it said delayed, but they didn't say how long. But at this time, authorities already knew that something was terribly wrong. They didn't know really what happened, and they didn't want to start a panic. So they eventually, which I don't know what time this was, announced that there had been a major delay. At first, when they had no choice but to say what was happening, they said that the plane was missing. They kind of announced this over Facebook, which I think it's pretty not tasteful, but the headlines started to pop everywhere. Disappeared from cyberspace before it disappeared from real space. It was kind of crazy in that Facebook thing. It's a case in itself, but another hour passed before friends and family of the passengers were informed that their loved ones had vanished without a trace. That must have been a very interesting conversation. By now, panic was all over the airport. People were mad, and they were kind of being violent at the information desk. So in the end, police had to escort these family members and friends into a separate waiting room, basically detaining them until further notice. The search for the plane began almost immediately, and it would become the most extensive and expensive investigation in aviation history. They had teams from China and Malaysia, Australia, and United States. The plane was never found, but debris believed to be connected to the missing flight were eventually washed up on the coast of the African island of Reunion. Still, these bits and pieces have done nothing really to explain how the entire Boeing 777 could disappear. So as you can probably tell by now, this kind of help people to come up with the craziest conspiracy theories. The human minds trying to explain the unexplainable really have taken us into some very interesting theories. One of the more popular ones is the one that flight MH370 disappeared in the so-called ghost plane. They believe that the plane experienced an abrupt cabbing, the depressurization that sucked out all the oxygen and quickly killed everyone in the cabin. Since wasn't a scheduled break that would have left co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid as the only alive inside the sealed cockpit. But if Hamid was alive, why did he then fly off into the Indian Ocean instead of attempting an emergency landing? It is theorized that the air pressure in the cockpit dropped as well, although not as bad as what happened before, so it was starving Hamid's brain of oxygen and leading him to make erratic decisions that resulted in the odd flight path. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into the realm of conspiracy, and because it was later discovered that two of the passengers boarded flight MH370 using stolen passports. So nobody knew who they were in the end because nobody knew their identities. But even it's okay. It is not uncommon for people to use stolen passports. Sometimes they are caught, sometimes they are not. People that use stolen passports, this is not me saying this, is according to, airport reports, are typically drug traffickers or criminals or illegal immigrants. Typically, terrorists would use their own passports to do whatever they're gonna do. They're not hiding their identities to do what they want to do. Okay. So that leaves us with Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. Captain Shah was investigated by Malaysian police, and they looked into his home flight simulator to make sure that he hadn't been planning a deviation in advance. But they found nothing. Now, there's also some people who believe that it could be paranormal, and that this plane was the victim of the Dragon's Triangle, a region of the Pacific Ocean, analogous to the Atlantic Ocean, infamous Bermuda Triangle, where strange things happen. So, did flight MH370 sleep through some sort of interdimensional portal in the Dragon's Triangle to never return? I mean, it's a possibility. And I guess that's where, the whole Manifest thing on Netflix is kind of going. I'm assuming that it kind of took that theory and run with it and made it into a very popular show on Netflix. I think it was top 10 for a while when the new season came out. So even Hollywood now knows how to use these theories to come up with the craziest and most intriguing and, I don't know, just overall captivating scenarios that you probably thought about this case MH370. They put together in such a good actors and everything that you can kind of see how it connects to the situation that really happened on MH370, like the family waiting for them at the airport, the plane vanishing, vanishing in the air, taking a different route, all the things. It's like, and I just think that it plays with your mind a little bit, and it takes you nowhere because they really don't explain this far. Spoiler alert, after season 2, it kind of doesn't explain what really happened. So, in our brains, it's easier to conceive the idea that something could go wrong in a show. But I don't think it's conceivable in our heads every time we board a plane, the possibility of vanishing into thin air, to go into an interdimensional portal in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Is that a possibility? Is that something that it's, real? It could be. I am not here to say that it is or it isn't, but I just want you to consider the possibilities in this case. Of course, there is that theory that this country shut them down, but again, because of where this would have happened, we'd still be able to find debris, definite proofs that it's part of this plane, and still we haven't. Now there's of course a new theory that it's everywhere that explains inconsistencies very clearly, and that's what I don't want to get into in this video, because it's more political than anything. And since there's no definite proof of anything really in this case, I just think that it takes us into a whole different direction. But in the end, we have over 200 passengers missing, 227. We have a pilot, a co-pilot, we have a flight attendant, we have crew that just vanished into thin air. We don't have a plane, we don't have definite proof that this plane actually crashed somewhere, which logic would say they would eventually fall down because they would run out of fuel. But there's a specific area where there's no way that it could have gone more than this specific area that they encompassed and looked and searched for that plane. It's either because of fuel, and the radar location, and calculating. This is a scientific thing. It's not like they couldn't have done. No, they couldn't have done it, period. Because of fuel reasons. And so, if the plane ran out of fuel, it couldn't have gone farther than there's a specific area, and the plane is still nowhere to be found. Some other crazy theories say, but crazy to me, I shouldn't have said that, but crazy to me is that they landed somewhere and they were taking prisoners. It would have been able to be identified by the radar where they were. So I don't think it's likely, but if you believe that theory, excuse me for saying that it's a crazy theory, but looking into all the reports and the experts explaining not only how the plane works, but the fuel and the autopilot, and even considering the problem in the cockpit where they were starving the honestly, it must have gone somewhere else. In my head, that's what I think. It must have gone somewhere else. We come back to the same principles like last Friday. Where are the bodies? Where is the plane? Where's the debris? Anyways, thank you so much for being here today. Please take the time and share with me what you think happened in this case. I really don't know what else could have happened, but if you have a different theory, or if you read somewhere a different theory that I didn't share in this video, feel free to share it in the comments. Another mystery, another Monday. Please join me on Wednesday for Soft Spoken Wednesday, and I'll talk to you guys then. You guys have an awesome